Okay, so in this video I'm going to talk about what is pointing. I'm going to try and clear this up, and again, most of you will understand or have a felt sense of what I'm talking about, but this video is mainly for those who feel like this is confusing and conflicted, and maybe feel like they're trying to figure out whether it's this, whether it's that. They maybe feel like everything's a concept and there's nothing out with that. So a common question or comment, not a question, that or both, I've seen reappear in different forms consistently over the years. I've officially been talking about this for years now. Is something like, or a version of, even non-duality is a concept, or even what the spiritual teachers are talking about is a concept or belief. And that's true on one level, but and I empathise with that point of view, because it was a point of view that I tried to uphold. I had to try and uphold it for a while, but it misses the point. It's missing something. And this is just going to remain a bunch of kind of, contradictory and confusing concepts, this pointing, until the one thing that the pointing is pointing to starts to clarify an experience. As in we need to have this aspect of curiosity. We need to have this one thing, or this kind of one orientation in our experience, or we need to kind of get this one thing about what pointing is for it to become effective or accessible to us. So what is pointing? Pointing is basically all I'm ever doing on this channel, and it's always going to be using a conceptual framework, a dualistic framework in language, and that's always going to be a description in some form. By default, everything I'm saying is filtered through, in one way, a subjective position. So logically, it's very easy to understand that anything I can say is always going to be a description of my own subjective experience. By default, that's just the way it is. So that's the conceptual side, right? But what the pointing, the function, the function it serves is to point using concepts and using this limited framework of language. There's a conceptual level of communication, right, between people, and that's the tool of language. That's what it's for. But the whole point of pointing is those concepts are pointing to that in our experience that is transcendent of concept. That in our experience right now, immediately, which is non-conceptual. And it does this through this is why I always say it doesn't have anything to do with the language, so to speak, on a conceptual level. Because if you were to take this purely conceptual, it just gets confusing, because I constantly contradict myself. And it doesn't make logical sense. It's confusing. And a lot of the people some of the people who are watching this aren't getting the one thing that I'm talking about that makes this resonance available, or the non-conceptual aspect of experience, transcendent of the content of thought, isn't quite clarifying yet. So the point of pointing is to I'm talking from this space of non-conceptuality. So my attention, so to speak, is primarily open in this space of non-conceptuality. From that, conceptual language appears. And the point of this is to transcend the limits of separation between me, the speaker, and you, whoever is listening. So there's a shared resonance here that has nothing to do with the separate characters. In that, this isn't an attempt of this character, David, here, to give you a conceptual framework about the way it is. Because I don't know the way it is conceptually. At all, right? The idea is to transcend those limits of separation. That's what we're talking about here, non-duality, not two. And in transcending those limits of separation, the language here is designed to, or its intention is to point you more and more immediately, more and more directly and deeply into your own immediate experience right now. That of your experience which is transcendent of concept. And for some of you, you know, a lot of people might, some of the videos I've got, you know, the algorithm punts them and it gets thousands of views or something. And, you know, I'm not super keen on that because a lot of people will come in and they're not even into non-duality. So all they're seeing is a bunch of concepts and it's really weird to them. It doesn't make any sense. And then you get the kind of people who are kind of on the path and they're seekers, but they're resisting. Part of them, and I've been here too, is resisting you through concepts, holding on to or resisting the non-conceptual aspect, which is already clarifying in their experience, is already becoming, it's elusive, but part of us knows it's there. But the more prominent part of us is really will you know, resist the concept. We'll fight to hold on to the concept. I described in the comments someone, this is a long time ago, over a year ago I think, someone reached out to me, and they were like, they reached out to me motivated purely by anger directed towards David, right? I know it's weird, I'm talking about myself in the third person, but directed towards me. And they really wanted to, in the conceptual sense, prove me wrong. And say, like, look, you're wrong about this. This isn't... And they were like, you know, making assumptions about my experience, and they were, you know, they were fighting to hold on to the conceptual thing. And I wasn't inclined, and I might be different now, but I wasn't inclined at that point in time, in that specific circumstance, to challenge that point of view, because I could feel that point of view was something, and I remember this, my own experience, was something that this person was really holding on to, and it was scary for them to let go of that. So all I can do is agree. When someone says anything to me, it's a description by default. It's a description of their experience, either a direct experience or a description of a thought in which they believe in which they're holding on to, identified with. So I can only agree with that. Sometimes if someone asks me directly, or it feels right, I'll challenge that belief. But people can get very defensive about it. So this kind of escalated, and I was very passive about it. I agreed, and I just kept kind of bringing it back to pointing in a kind of indirect way. And then all of a sudden, this person got it. It flipped. You're probably watching this video, so you remember this. This person got it, and it just flipped. And they were like, "I'm so sorry. I didn't understand." Like. And in retrospect, it was very self-aware. Like, it was strange. It was like, throughout this whole time, all I could see was true nature, awakeness, describing an uncomfortable experience of a not real, imagined experience of being this character stuck in thought. And in that whole thing, there was like an authenticity to it that I could just feel. And then when it flipped, immediately this person could see what was happening there, and in retrospect they said, I was too scared I was trying to disprove you because I wanted you to be wrong, because about this whole awakening thing, because the prospect of the unknown was terrifying to me. Or they used paraphrasing here. So that's the reason why we hold on to these, or it was for me, why I held on to, and from what I've learned talking to people, hold on to the conceptual framework because it's familiar. It's something that can make this experience feel known to us in a tangible and controllable way. What I'm pointing to is something completely transcendent of those conceptual frameworks. And it is in your experience, and you can confirm everything that I'm talking about in your experience just by looking. So all we're ever talking about here is experience immediately, right now. Not a concept about it, or a belief about it, or a belief system, or a framework about, a conceptual framework about what it is and what it means, or how it is objectively. But that in your experience right now that you can't put into words because it's too complete. It comes before the thought that would give rise to the description of how it is. So immediate we look past it all the time. As soon as we start thinking about it, we've missed it. But those conceptual thoughts, the thoughts that contain the concept, are made of what I'm pointing to, are made of something transcendent of the concepts that they seem to communicate. So you see how strange and paradoxical this language is that I'm using right now? The style of speaking, the pointing is so flexible because it's there are no rules with it. So I never have a script. I never think about what I'm going to say beforehand. I just start talking, and I'm talking from this non-conceptual beingness. And that non-conceptual beingness in me is talking directly to the non-conceptual beingness in you. And that shared resonance isn't even shared because we are the one thing. You can connect with that in your experience. You can open yourself up to that in your experience, such that this unknowable mystery that is life starts to clarify itself in a way completely transcendent of the character, the narrative, or the concept. Completely transcendent of the limits, the boundaries of separation. So I always say, this isn't me, David, talking to you, the listener. It's awakeness, listening to itself, making sound, hearing itself, transcendent of those boundaries, transcendent of those limits of separation. So the style of pointing, the speaking style of pointing is a mere tool that should be used to point whoever is listening, and also me who's talking, orient deeper and deeper into directly and immediately this experience right now. So this bottle of water, don't know if this will work. This bottle of water is, the seeing of it, the image of it, whatever that is not conceptual. This is direct. If I start thinking about the chemical composition of water, or the plastic, or what I used it for earlier, or what I'm going to use it for later, or what it means, if I start thinking about it, that's conceptual. So this plastic bottle, there both is a concept and isn't a concept here at the same time. I'm talking about what's not a concept. So the concept is this thing exists on its own. and it has inherent existence as a bottle or plastic or water. That's all concepts. The direct experience of this existing right now in the scene as the scene is not a concept. That'll be hard to follow for some people, but the more language I use, if we're not connecting with that in our experience right now that's not conceptual, the more language I use, the more confusing it's going to get. So most of my viewers will get this. And again, I've said this a few times, you can see the difference in the comments. Most of my viewers will get it, and they'll talk about their own experience. They'll give like a self-report of what's happening in their experience right now. And then the ones who do get it but are still holding on to concepts, there'll be like a kind of back and forth type thing. And then the ones that are really holding on to the conceptual or kind of can't connect with anything beyond the conceptual frameworks, we'll talk about either someone else's experience, talk about what this means, how it is, or just give a conceptual framework about what's going on here, what non-duality is, or what pointing is, and so on. So how we're doing this is we're looking into our own experience immediately right now. That's all we're interested in, and we can confirm this just by looking, just by becoming attentive to what's going on right now. So the difference between direct experience and, let's say, indirect experience, right? Maybe a bad distinction. So an indirect experience would be like what I'm going to experience when I become enlightened, which only appears as a direct experience of thought right now. That's what I'm talking about. So if you're struggling with concepts, right, if you don't feel like the resonance is here or is accessible when you're listening to these videos, we can do a little experiment right now. So let's decide for ourselves we're going to use a meditation object. And let's use a meditation object, let's say in the visual, so something that's in front of us right now. So we're going to put our entire focus of attention directly onto this sense object. So for me, there's a tree in front of me, like a mossy tree. And we're going to keep our attention there with as much, we're going to keep as much of our attention in that looking as possible, in that image, in that object as possible. So we know if attention deviates or moves away from this object, there's a distraction, there's a break in concentration. And that's basically, the fundamental tool that we use in this awakening thing is attention or concentration. So let's move our attention into the object. And we're going to explore that object in more detail than we usually would with anything else. So let's do it now. Okay, so what's happening in the mind? So we know if attention moves away from that vivid and direct experience of the object that's in front of us, that's a distraction. So where was attention moving? What felt, if your attention moved away from the object, what felt What do you feel like happened there? Yes. What do you feel happened there? What happened? Where did the tension move to? I'm going to suggest that it's going to be moving into thought. So we're going to start thinking about that object right now, which is good, because that means our focus of attention has become more immediate. It's closer to direct experience. We're not thinking about something else, another time. We're not having, direct self-referential thoughts. So the attention moves up into the mind. So we recognize that when it happens, and then we kind of snap out of that. There's like a dreamlike, for me there was a dreamlike quality to it. It dulled the senses. It made everything less vivid, less alive, and it was automatic, it was habitual. So when that happens, we're going to recognize it when it does, and we're going to bring the full attention straight back to the object again. Okay, so we're going to spin this to inquiry. So we know now the kind of attention that we're looking to practice, or the focus that we're looking to cultivate to be able to inquire effectively in this, into what is not conceptual. So now we're just going to relax the focus, and we're going to focus on something else, but it's not specific. You could maybe say the awareness, or the self-awareness, or the knowingness, the beingness, the aliveness, the isness, or the noticing itself. We hear awareness of awareness. We're just going to notice this, the overall quality of existence, as in being wide awake and aware. And in that, we're going to let attention move where it wants to move. If the mind is just ramping up straight away and you're not quite connecting with this aliveness, what we're going to do is we're going to turn the attention around back towards you and ask, what am I that's aware of my experience? So when thought starts to move, where is it moving? What does that feel like? For me, it felt like I was blinkering down into kind of like a disassociated state, and it was very familiar and habitual. But at the same time, I was also coming back from the sense experience and relating to it from a kind of felt position. So we're going to recognize what's going on directly in thought. So instead of following the content of thought, we're going to notice the substance of thought. We're going to look directly at what's happening in mind when I identify with a movement of thought. So we're going to put our attention on the awareness of thought immediately right now, with the intention, the awareness on the one who's aware, that feels like me. Then we're going to ask, what is the next thought? And become very interested in the actual substance of the thought experience as it's happening now. So where's thought moving? We're not interested in what it's saying. We're not interested in generating another thought that's going to resist thought, so to say, I can't stop thinking, my mind's noisy. Whatever thought's appearing immediately right now, we're going to direct the attention straight towards that thought. Sometimes it helps to make it as big as possible or as loud as possible in your mind. or we can repeat it a few times, so it feels like we're kind of taking control of the thought in a way. So what happens when we direct attention by asking what will be the next thought? There's a bit of quietness there. You know, the thought, the experience of thinking takes on a different quality. There's a kind of openness there, there's a kind of expanded aperture there that feels quite still, feels quite alive, feels quite peaceful. It might not, but that simple awakeness, that simple awareness that is always right here, that is here now, that is the fabric of your experience of yourself. That's what we're investigating here. So we see that habitual and automatic movement to identify with thought, and then the thoughts just kind of start running on their own into a narrative about something that's not here. We're just recognizing that and coming back to immediacy. We're recognizing the direct experience of thinking rather than what the thought is talking about in the conceptual sense. And from this little exercise, you can maybe get a glimpse into how hypnotizing and how habitually kind of magnetic that thought experience is for absorbing all of our attention. We can see how limited our attention is when we seem to consciously decide to be attentive in one aspect of experience. So in practicing this way, we cultivate this kind of intimate relationship, it starts off with, with our direct experience. And then even in doing this one little exercise, we're breaking some of that habitual pattern. Every time we notice that we're lost in thought, and then there might come in another thought, but in the next thought, the thought that says I'm lost in thought, our attention is on the direct substance of that thought, being wide awake, aware, self-aware, and alive. Every time we notice that, we're breaking a little bit of this habitual cycle of identified thinking. And when we keep doing that, we'll start to notice that the movement of thought will kind of calm down. So you can kind of imagine thought as like smoke or liquid. So like when the smoke or the liquid can form different shapes, and this would be like the thought substance, can form different shapes, or it can relax into just a still kind of see-through transparent substance. So when there's a storm in this, let's use water. When there's a storm in this water, let's say we're completely submerged. The water kind of takes on all these shapes, and it's difficult to see and know what's going on. But when those shapes and forms relax, the water becomes completely still and transparent. The substance of it is still there. It doesn't go away. So there's no distinction between thought and no thought. There's just the movement. When that movement calms down, then the clarity is available. And we can see that this thought substance, or the substance of experience, is inherently always self-aware, knows itself, without having to form in the shape of it, in the thought, without having to form a subject and an object to relate to something. And then that self, say I saw this one recently, I can't remember who said it, the swimmer who's swimming in the ocean eventually realises that the swimmer is made of water, is not separate from the ocean, so then disappears and becomes the totality of the ocean, totality of experience, without separation. So I hope that kind of makes sense, and I just encourage anyone who is engaging with me in this channel, sending me an email or commenting, I would much rather hear a description of your own experience, because at a certain point the concepts just get boring. What we discover as the non-conceptual nature of reality is so much more captivating, beautiful, interesting, such that the concepts are just discardable. The concepts don't really make sense anymore. They're not interesting. What I'm interested in, and what I'm interested in hearing, is your own experience. What is your experience of yourself? And the majority of the comments recently have been very good. I've really been enjoying them. I've really been enjoying talking to people, going through this, and it's exciting. It's fun. So I'll leave it there for now, and talk to you next time.